Hi, this is Scott Holstad, poet, writer, author, and it's the morning of December 21st, Sunday. Not too early, not too late. Other people aren't up yet, but for me, that's getting late, actually. I'm going to try an experiment, sort of ambitious for me, although I don't think it's particularly ambitious, but sort of going against the grain recently, in several ways. If you've caught several of my recent videos, you may have noted that I've been having some excessive health problems over the past few months. Not unknown, of course, but just increasingly difficult, culminating in my being hospitalized recently and having to have emergency surgery to lop off almost part of my thumb, my right hand. And tomorrow I have pre-op for a much bigger surgery in early January, in which they're going to be trying to repair an utterly trashed rotator cuff. They're going to remove a bicep that's been completely torn, and the ball in this joint is largely shattered. My shoulder's totally fucked. And the thumb, which I'm not showing, but it's looking much better. All of this is on my writing hand and arm. It's really impacted my ability to both write in terms of, creative content, as well as emails, correspondence, anything else. And I've had some other issues too. Health hasn't helped my mood. And I've had a couple of videos lately, one in particular where I decided to read some material from my new book of poems, which came out in October, Surviving Immortality Again, Scott Holstad, published by Alien Buddha Press. Available at Amazon, 132 pages, very nice book, 90 poems, $12.99. It's gotten a lot of reviews, including Kirkus reviews and other professional reviews, and on Amazon and Goodreads, and thanks to all, it's done fairly well. But it's a bit of a dark book, and I was in a dark mood, so I went at it. Not my darkest, but and in between, after that, I read a few light Christmas haiku from an anthology that was just published a couple of weeks ago. Light fare, but it was about a minute-long video. And then last week I read a story, a postmodern story, metafiction, which called Dazed, which lasted way too long, as did the dark reading, and that's something I'm trying to figure out how to address. They're too long, but those of you who may have seen that video, I hope like the story, but the story, as I acknowledged up front, could be offensive to some. Influenced by Martin Amis, influenced by Anthony Burgess, a lot of violent sex, absurdity, as postmodern literature often is supposed to be. And because 2 or 3 of my recent videos have been a little heavier or a little darker, I have alluded to, if not promised, I'm going to try and do some lighter fare in a video very soon. Humorous poems. I actually used to write quite a few. They weren't always G-rated, but they weren't all or X-rated either. And in fact, early on, I was compared a lot, still am sometimes, but to Bukowski, who I was published a lot with, and something today that I hadn't really planned to do. If you've caught some of these videos, you know that in addition to supporting the new book, my first in quite a while, and reading various from journals and reading stories and other things, I've also started reading from my out-of-print old ancient back catalog of a lot of chapbooks and books, starting with the first one, chronological order. I've only gone through maybe 3. But usually just 2 or 3 poems from each one, trying to keep the video short, because I know that seems to be the preference probably for most people, and I get that, but that's one of my great weaknesses. However, in an effort and desire to read some lighter fare, some humorous poems, and back from about that same time frame, so I'm not really chronologically going out of order too much. I think I had a couple of small collections, chapbooks, that were sort of noted for being more humorous and little Bukowski attitude at times, not always intentional, but and not really very akin to my later, darker stuff of some years later. And one of these was a chapbook called Binge, which was published, and here it is, in 1994 in Los Angeles by Undulating Bedsheets Productions. If you've never heard of them, that's not surprising. It's a lot of small independent publishers out there, but they also did publish, they still may for all I know, even though it's been a long time, a really cool zine called Driver's Side Airbag, and they published a lot of really, big names in the small press community, small press poets, published me, and a lot of other people. And the publisher, Mike Halchin, was a really good guy. Still is, I assume. I haven't seen or talked to him in a long time, but he suggested putting out a collection of mine. And aside from my writing the manuscript and turning it in, he took care of everything. And this was small. It's maybe a couple dozen pages, and but it was well received. In fact, the late Marvin Malone, the great editor of the sadly defunct, esteemed Wormwood Review, infamous Wormwood Review, which happened to be, if you don't know, the publisher for Bukowski, that published Bukowski by far more than any other magazine or journal out there. I'm not counting books, they weren't a book publisher, but Wormwood Review was kind enough to describe Binge. I believe Malone wrote that it was highly recommended, maybe even called it a modern classic, which is a stretch, but I'll take it from him especially. And so I hadn't really thought about doing this, but it's a small little collection. These are short little poems, and most of them are intended to be kind of funny or funky or wacky, but not particularly dark, like, again, much of my later stuff and some of my recent videos. And so in an effort to make good on my promise to try and read some lighter fare and maybe some funny poems, I decided and this may be a really bad idea and I may not be able to pull it off, then I'm going to try to read the entire chapbook, Binge, right now for this video. Because really, it's pretty small. Most of it's pretty cohesive, and some people think fairly funny. I hope those of you who may see this will agree with that, and forgive me for the recent black moods. But, you know, it's an experiment, like I said, and wasn't something I had intended, but, you know, why the hell not, you know? And I'm going to have to put on some reading glasses because my eyes, yes, are now that bad at this age. Just like my mother predicted, because reading 16 hours a day, I thought I could get away with for life without damage, and Mom told me I was wrong about that, and she was right. So I'm just going to try to go from beginning to end. It's so small there aren't page numbers, but again, if I recall correctly, it's somewhere around 20 pages. And most of these poems take up, you know, one page at the most. And if it doesn't seem to be working out, I'll cut it short. And let's just see how it goes. I hope for those of you who see this, if I complete this video and put it online, will enjoy seeing and hearing sort of maybe a different or new aspect to what you've been used to if you've not been familiar with my career, and most of you haven't been because I'm that old and you're not. So as the music reaction kids out there say when they get ready to look at videos and proclaim them, oh cool, and they want to get, you know, tipped for that. Notice I don't have a Patreon. I'm not begging for money. You know, I should be though. Without further ado, to quote them, I'm just going to leap into the first one, and it is titled "Bubbly Warm Fuzzies." Got home last night from beering down with a few friends, and my wife came at me crying and shaking, and she told me the publisher from Georgia called, and when my wife answered the phone, he said, "Oh, fuck, it's you," which, of course, thrilled my wife to no end, and the publisher proceeded to kill off a six-pack while regaling her with tales of Bukowski hanging sweaty balls, shitbags on old people, and sundry other assorted topics. And while my wife was recovering from having to endure 35 minutes of long-distance madness, the phone rang again, and the sound oozed through the air, fixing us in place where we stared warily at one another until the answering machine came through, and it was him. "Scott, man, I'm being evicted. You live in California, I live in Georgia." Click. "Happy dreams." And my wife looked at me and asked, "Why do you always get the crazy publishers interested in your stuff?" But the answer seemed self-explanatory, and we left it at that. Perhaps little has changed in many ways. The next poem is called "Ticker Blues." God, my chest hurts very nearly every day now. People laugh and say, "You've got heartburn," so I take Tums, which doesn't help. It's a special kind of tightness which won't go away. Some people tell me that I'm heartbroken or depressed, but I've been both, and this is neither. The other day someone told me to go to the doctor. On what? My writer's health insurance policy? I just finished paying off an emergency room bill from 2 years ago. Yeah, I think I'm going to bite the big one and keel over, croak, and all that sort of thing any day now, any hour, any minute, any second, any time. And you know what? As my current book that just came out, that would be called Surviving Immortality Again, suggests, that prediction back in 1994 was pretty damn wrong. I just cannot kick the bucket no matter what. All right, this next poem is called Mean. Yes. I once wrote a poem called Nice. It was about my experiencing giving a reading at a university in Southern California in which I was expected to play the heavy against some meek, mild Canadian geezer. The juxtaposition worked perfectly and the organizers were thrilled. I recently participated in another reading in the same area. This won the publication party for a fairly decent magazine. Rather than two, there were several readers. One of the poems I read was called One of Those Days, about decking a crazy DD slob. The audience at this year reading was made up of people from 5 to 80, and so I thought maybe I would alleviate their fears and told them this poem was simply an ID-driven statement. I wouldn't really deck a retarded person, and yes, back in 94, you could still say that. Probably wouldn't say that now. Going back from the aside to the poem, well, after I was done, someone else got up there. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard, unlike Holstad, my shit is true. Well, I turned my eye to the podium, and what did I see but some mean, nasty old tottering geezer from fucking New Mexico up there ranting and raving with bad Bukowski-like poems about bars and fights and girls, and the kicker was, get this, his voice was so damn high-pitched and feeble that I thought he was a girl till I looked at him real hard. Well, bully for him, I thought. Christ, where does he get off bagging on me? I mean, if this guy ever did get hit in a fight, it'd be all over. But if all those claims he makes are true, those New Mexico nursing homes must be pretty damn rough. The irony is, this individual, no longer with us sadly, was actually a really nice guy, was actually a really tough guy, and ended up writing and saying some really nice things about me years later, while he was still alive. And so then I felt especially bad for writing and publishing that poem. But it seemed funny at the time. I was still young and immature. I'm old, but still probably immature. Okay. Garbage. We went to a little dinner party in Hollywood, and some of the big shots were there. Fashion designers, photographers, actors and actresses, and we heard lots of talk about how this person designed the clothes for the statues at Caesars, and that person did this commercial and that show, and the other people had these projects, and how you wouldn't believe what kind of money they got. And someone stopped mid-sentence and looked at me and asked, so what do you do? And I hemmed and hawed and finally sputtered the writer, poet. It was all over then. Momentary utter silence and people edging away. Even the pampered cat took off like someone was trying to cut its furry little nuts off, and I sighed and returned to the wine, contemplating telling people upon the next such occasion that I'm simply a sanitation engineer. And if you don't think that was a true fucking story, well, I'll leave that up to you. Uptight. I grew up in a fairly anal household in which I was taught how to behave at church, at school, at work, while driving, etc., etc. A pun, it seemed, pain of death. But by far the most important event which necessitated proper behavior was dinner. We eat like this. We hold our fork like this. We behave like this while at the dinner table, and I grew up a scared and scarred child. I went home recently to visit my dear parents, my dear late parents. This is a very old book, and it's been a long time, so And to my perfect horror, my mother spent the entire time speaking with her mouth full. Current events. Did you hear? Politics. That Hillary. Religion. Church was so. What? When I attempted to upbraid her, she pleaded ignorance, expressed shock and outrage at my impudence until I finally shut up about it. Now I am left dazed and confused, wondering whether it's really okay after all to fart in public. Headlining. My head is pounding, and I'm feeling a mite dehydrated, and have wandered to the local coffee hole in hopes of some sharp caffeinated relief, and everything's spinning counterclockwise, and three nearly burly... The ink has smeared. Bullies are sitting across from me, slamming shit down, looking hard and unapproachable. And the rent's due, and bills are due, and everything's due. Where's my due, man? And a pretty girl with a big ass walks by smoking a cig, leaving wisps of waspy tendrils in her wake, and my head is throbbing, and two old ladies are glaring hard at me, staring laser beam looks right through me, and I know I'm whining, but I haven't got my new book accepted. My little posies is laying low at lazy-ass editors' offices, waiting and awaiting, like my stories and my articles, but the bills, they're coming on fast as usual, and somehow I gotta go to Phoenix Monday, and then maybe on to Frisco before starting my life in Long Beach over and over and over again. And we're about halfway through, and this is taking longer than I expected, but it's because I rambled so much before ever beginning. Excuse me for a second. Let's get together sometime. We were at a wedding reception in Burbank, being held at a combination bowling alley, ice rink, and banquet hall, and were seated at a table with some people we didn't know. A girl 2 chairs away appeared to be 30ish, had auburn hair, flowing black clothes, and a penchant for pleasant chatter. Over the course of conversation, we gleaned from her that she was a fundamentalist Pentecostal Christian who drank, danced, partied Hollywood style, and was a movie fashion designer. Interesting. After she learned we had done Vegas only last week, she excitedly told us she was being flown out by Caesars to design the clothes for their new moving statues. After a while, we decided to leave, knowing it would take forever to get back down to Long Beach, and the girl expressed sadness at our leaving and suggested we exchange phone numbers so we could all get together again for a drink sometime. And I must admit that visions of alcohol-induced, lust-filled, kinky threesomes fleetingly danced through my mind as we wrote our respective numbers out, but I doubt we'll ever call each other anyway, and I'll just content myself to think various California thoughts. We'll call you. Got a call for an interview with some big-time honcho, and they wanted me the next day, so I rushed about garnering bits of advice from professors, old and new alike, as well as assorted others on the scene, and I whined, said, look, they're going to ask me all sorts of situational type questions, which I won't be able to answer. But they all said no, they wouldn't be that unfair to you. They assured me over and over, so I prepared best I could, went to the interview, and after asking the usual about my education They came at me, one after another. What would you? How would you? When would you? What response would you? Over and over and over. And I gave the usual, that would be contingent, of course, upon the target market and the segmentation within. Are we targeting specific economic groups, age groups, geographic locations, demographics, blah, 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 blah. And as I wiped the sweat away afterwards from my eyes while heading back up the 405, I cussed those fucking professors and every other asshole who taught me about fairness and rest is secure and the knowledge that at least my suit looked damn good. But she only had her shoes off. We were tooling down Broadway in North K-Town shortly after midnight. Admittedly, we weren't paying that much attention, just sort of yapping along, when I realized that I had just blatantly run red. But there weren't too many cars around, so I just kind of kept on going for a second or two longer until the inevitable sirens. Fucking cop had seen me. And I don't know what the hell came over me, but I fucking floored it. And the car surged ahead, and she started screaming, "What the fuck are you doing?" But it was too late. I made 5 more reds, tried to take a few cars out on my way down some alleys before they got me up against a brick wall, legs spread wide, 6 redneck cops, guns drawn, and God did they let me have it. When I came to my senses later, I was facing speeding, reckless driving, fleeing to escape arrest, attempting to resist arrest, attempted vehicular homicide, and statutory rape. Tons of K's and serious jail time. Luckily, the good old boy system was greased, and they changed the dockets without informing the cops who wanted me gone. And no one showed at the hearing, so all the charges were dropped, and now I owe my ass to more people than I care to think about. And since a topic such as that these days, for many obvious reasons, is a sketchy topic, let me just say that the statutory rape had to do with my college freshman girlfriend who was 17, and I was an 18-year-old college sophomore. So it was not any sort of Epstein or fuck it all, whatever thing like that. It was, yeah, I had pissed them off, and they just wanted to stick it to me. You know? Of course, it's all fiction, right? Creative writing. None of this is true. At least I made her laugh. I found out recently that a dear friend of mine had just experienced a terrible tragedy. Her fiancé, not yet 40, had keeled over on the spot, no warning. I called her, and she was understandably devastated, suicidal even. She asked Scott, "If I'm doing badly, can I call you to talk, regardless of the time?" I assured her that she could, indeed. She said, "I might be hyperventilating or something." I told her, "That's okay. I'll probably think it's an obscene phone call, and I'll have a good time getting off over the phone, baby." Alleviated the tension a little bit there. Knoxville Night Court Blues. I walked into Night Court and said, "Oh shit." There were at least 75 people there waiting to go before the judge. I looked around and spotted my lawyer. He motioned me over and said, "Look, we'll just get you in and out quicker than shit, and I'll try and get you off on probation. That is, if the cop will agree to it." So I nodded and watched as he made his way back to the judge's chambers, and I wouldn't have been so nervous if it hadn't been for the fact that this was my 3rd time in front of this very judge that very year. And, well, moments later, the bailiff came in and announced the judge, and my lawyer came sidling in the side entrance, and I held my breath as they took the docket up and announced Holstad. And I came forward meekly, as my lawyer had suggested, head down. And it happened quickly, while the cop, who I had called a fucking redneck asshole as he arrested me 3 months earlier, glared at me, and my lawyer did it. 1 year unsupervised probation plus court costs, and I gleefully pulled out the old checkbook, knowing this would be my last time Again, idiot magnet. Why do they think that when you are occupied reading the LA Times, or perhaps a fine novel, that in reality you are dying of loneliness and in specific need of their company? Summer party. We hit the party, and some of them were there, and the band was banging out sharp tunes, and the singer was wailing, so I snagged one of my little bottles of Jack I had in my pocket and took a lengthy swig, and one of them came up to me and said, "Yo, Scott, gotta get out there and dance." So I joined the throng and executed a perfect swan dive into the middle, listening to the ooze of appreciation. And later, Jerry Laughlin and I shot the usual, gossiping about which editors were certified assholes. And later, as we left, small Mexican children next door were beating a piñata senseless as candy rained down from the sky. And, I think I just pulled off reading Binge, which Marvin Malone, in the Wormwood Review, Bukowski's greatest publisher, strongly recommended and I believe called a modern classic. Feel free to disagree. I'm not even sure I agree, but like I said earlier, I'll take it from that great man, R.I.P. And so this was meant to be different from the norm, or a recent norm for me, in terms of videos and what I've been reading. And I hope those of you who stuck through this, if there are any who saw this, enjoyed it, thought it was something different. See that I'm actually multifaceted. I'm actually writing a lot of different genres as well as a lot of different styles. So this is hard to find. If you're interested, I do actually still have a few new, if you will, unused, to be found for purchase for a small fee on my website, which is hankrules2011.com. I don't have all of my books or collections available. I don't even have copies of some myself at all. But there are some things there. And if you want to find or look for other things, you can find some of my collections on the Internet Archive. You can find some for sale on Amazon and other places. And you can just, do a search for Scott Holstad or Scott C Holstad, and depending on what search engine, and if you add anything like author or poet or poetry, you come up with hundreds of hits if you're interested in reading stuff that may be more current or whatever, or not. As I always seem to forget to say while preparing to end these videos, thanks so much for those of you who've watched this. Please like, subscribe, share, by all means share. I don't get many views on YouTube because I guess I don't do the algorithm thing or whatnot, but people sharing to other platforms, I find that there are a lot of people accessing these videos in other locations directed back to YouTube here. Feel free to comment. I'd love to hear from you. And I can't really predict my reading schedule or anything. Things are really up in the air right now with the surgeries and other stuff I've got going on. And it's the holidays. So I'll end it by saying that 2025 has been a hell of a son of a bitch of a year, personally, and for many of us here in this country and throughout the world. And here's hoping for a good, safe, positive holiday season for all of us, and that 2026 will be a much improved year for most of us, if possible. You know, the world is an interesting place, and can always stand to be improved, just like all of us. Since I still suck horribly at ending these videos, I'm going to do what I typically have been doing lately and just end it. It's Sunday. Have a good Sunday if you catch this today. Otherwise, have a good week. Have a good rest of 2025. Here's to, like I said, a much better 2026. Thanks so much, and ciao.